man, we got it so fucking good here. It is heaven on earth. It really is. All of this place, you know, and it really leaves people disinclined. They get almost, they just go into this sleepwalk thing, or it's so beautiful it doesn't, you know, you don't actively have to get on the front foot to look after it, and you just assume it's going to look after itself and it's always going to be there. And I think, you know, the last couple of weeks we've had a pretty rude reminder that it's not always going to be like that. It's probably going to take some people to take a bit of a fight to save it.
That's Sean Doherty, and you're listening to
The Beginning of Earth.
Feel like something is rapidly transfigurating in my core of being, an awakening of sorts.
The Beginning of Earth.
A raw conversation hosted by your main frother, Billy Otto.
pulling apart what it means to rebirth, to rewild, to be curious, and to rechild.
Something good. It's something real. Can you feel it? Everybody, heads in the air.
Hey fam, it's so good to be back again. Here I am in Lennox Head. It's Friday morning. Slept like a beast. Been making music all week with my mate. And it's so good just to be able to come back to presence and peace. Did some breath work this morning. And feeling really renewed and reset for the weekend. I'm sorry that this podcast has come a little bit late. There's just been a few very good things that have been going down. But I just want to start by just reading out a bit of feedback I received from last week's podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. That was the part 1 of the making of the Born EP with my friend Jara, and hope you enjoyed it. Just got this one from Steph. A little notification. Oh my God, I just listened to your latest podcast, loved it, and totally relate to everything you said about the life of a teacher. Listening to you and your guest speakers on your podcast the last few weeks inspired me to tell my principal the other day that I'm having next year off! Exclamation. Ooh, emoji. I feel so free, so thank you for being part of my mental journey to take a leap of faith and just do it and know anything is possible and that opportunities will arise. Steph, that little DM made my day. Thank you so much. The making of that podcast episode really made me realize how much I need to be grateful for opportunities that I've had to make art and to grow that artistic language. This week is a bit different. We're diving deep with Sean Doherty. I love Sean Doherty. Surf writer, editor, Patagonia, brand ambassador. At the start of this year, life looked a lot different. It was the middle of summer and our country of Australia was on fire. Yeah, proper. It was a brutal time, and there's a lot of division in politics. There's a lot of confusion. But for myself, people that are still pretty fresh to understanding politics and big oil, big fossil fuel companies, it was really powerful coming back to Shauno, to his Instagram, and kind of just getting a tangible, palpable insight into how to understand the systems and things that need to change. I recorded this inside Sean's house, his old house in Byron Bay, when I was coming through to do some shows at the start of this year. And there is a lovely little whippersnipper lawnmower man that is buzzing away next to where we're recording, so just bear with us. But we go deep and we talk brow boys, we talk cicadas, we talk about the life that he had in Newcastle and Foster, but also the deeper dreams that were emerging as he went into his heart and realised that he was not called to be a doctor. It was actually because of Sean that I was able to travel Australia as part of the Fight For The Bight campaigns and the Patagonia film. So yeah, super grateful for his vision.
The beginning of us.
Just want to welcome the rogue writer, journo, Patagonia brand manager, world tour correspondent. Mate, this guy, he's lived 9 lives and he's an absolute frother.
Are you reading from the list there, Bill?
No, I'm actually not. I was just like, it's all here. The Asian brain. But, Shauna, you've become, you don't like to say it, but you've become a bit of an uncle to me. You prefer cousin, right?
Yeah,
Keeps you
cousin,
younger.
yeah, it makes me feel younger. Although now I've just found out how old you are. I think we're closer on par.
Nah, man, it's such an honour to have a chat. I really appreciate your time.
Welcome to the lounge room, Bill. Good to have you here.
Cool. Where are we?
We are in Ruskin Street, Byron Bay, in an old banger fibro kind of beach shack that I rent when I'm here. Yeah, it's nice.
So still living between here and Torquay?
Yep, still bouncing around between here and Torquay. I'm back to Torquay tomorrow. So when I get sick of the cold in Torquay, I come to Byron. And when I get sick of human beings in Byron, I go to Torquay. It's a nice balance.
Awesome, man. Shauna, you bring so much energy to people's lives, and I think you've become a real voice of hope and beautiful criticism in this time of broken leadership in our country. But yeah, like what wakes you up in the morning?
This week, kids. They're generally up pretty early. No, I'm up before dawn every day. Yeah. Best hours of the day, first couple, easy. But I don't know. I'm between a lot of things right now. Usually it's kind of some kind of coastal activity gets me up and moving. Early surf, although that's become pretty tough up here in the last few years with the sharks. But yeah, it gets me up, mate. My passions, I suppose, and I hate that word. It's just
Why do you hate the word passions?
Oh, it's so overdone. It's overdone. It's been overcooked in so many capacities that it's lost all meaning. Yeah. You know, it's lost the true meaning of what it actually is. But I am passionate about writing. I'm passionate about the coast. I'm passionate about saving the coast. I'm passionate about going surfing. Very passionate about that.
Yeah. I recall calling you the other day, and in the midst of, obviously people see you as a bit of a commentator right now on current politics and lack of good policy and conservation. But in the middle of all of that, I called you, you're at the beach, you're at the pass, with your feet in the water, just kind of chilling out. And you told me that you were decompressing.
Well, as much as you can with your phone still near. I actually went. No, the best thing was I had all these people I had to call, and we've been down the pass the last 4 or 5 days, and the kids just take the longboard out, and I don't even see them. It's like the babysitter. I just send them out, and they just cause havoc out there. And I try not to look and see what kind of havoc they're causing. But I had all these calls I was going to make, and I got down there, and I'd left my phone at home, and I went, and I kind of. For the first 5 minutes, I'm kind of wigging out a bit, just going, fuck, something's wrong, you know. And then I just went, man, this is actually life, you know, to not be with it. And it's just been, and generally I'm like that anyway. Like I don't feel a need to be attached to that thing. And I don't really have this strong social urge to have to talk to people all the time. I'm actually really antisocial in a lot of ways. But then in the middle of what's happening with all the fires and the activism and the whole deal, and like you said, you know, what's happening in this country right now, it's been a really rad kind of couple of weeks. And so kind of even, you know, it's funny, you sit down there at the pass, it's the most, well, it's not really peaceful because there's 8 million fucking people down there, but it's like you go, man, this is just the most beautiful part of Australian life here, you know, you're living this beautiful part of life, and you're looking back at the hinterland, it's just like it doesn't get any better. And then you look at your phone and you just go, mate, what a shit show. It's like half the country's up in flames, pretty much everyone is just up in arms, and it's just like, how can something so good become something so bad at the same time? And you're living this weird juxtaposition between it.
Yeah,
and
it's almost like a dissonance.
It's real. It is a real, and it's what has stopped Australia, you know, probably for the last 30 years, and probably even going back further than that. Man, we've got it so fucking good here. It is heaven on earth. It really is. All of this place, you know, and it it really leaves people disinclined. They get almost, they just go into this sleepwalk thing, or it's so beautiful that it doesn't, you don't actively have to get on the front foot to look after it, and you just assume it's going to look after itself and it's always going to be there. And I think, the last couple of weeks we've had a pretty rude reminder that it's not always going to be like that. It's probably going to take some people to take a bit of a fight to save it. So,
yeah, I want to go there, man. I think too, as an Australian right now, like I've been surfing the last 2 weeks, getting really fun waves up at Noosa, Goldie, Kingy, down here, and I feel like I'm kind of living in this duality of like I'm experiencing bliss, serenity, peace. Other people have lost their homes, whole ecosystems being destroyed and ravaged.
Yeah.
It's just weird. And there's nothing that I can actually do right now for my brothers and sisters suffering in Gippsland and in Kangaroo Island. And we're all trying to raise money. Yesterday we had like thousands coming down for our little busk festival that we had. But it's just weird when we just don't feel like we have conscious leadership. And it's not even a hate campaign. I'm sure Scotty, he's probably a great dad. Like, it's not actually about fucking scapegoating one guy and just trying to pin him, laying all our sins on that one lamb. But it's just weird.
Yeah, it really is at a strange point right now, and that I think pretty much. And I had this conversation with someone yesterday. It's like I think everyone's known and accepts what's been happening, and climate change is there, and it's always we've talked about it for a long time, and we've understood it, and we know, what it looks like in numbers and in theory and whatever. But I think what you've seen in the past few weeks is that, mate, that's what it looks like. That's what it feels like. With Sydney covered in smoke, with the South Coast up in fire, with Kangaroo Island on fire, with this, that's what it looks like. It's kind of here. It was going to take that to really to kind of shock people out of the comfort zone that they're in. Yeah, as I was talking about, like living here just makes you feel, like you said, it's so beautiful. It just numbs you into this false sense of reality that it's always going to stay like that.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Yeah. And we've just been, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen it. We've got a glimpse of what it could be like. Yeah. And it's pretty fucking scary.
So scary. Do you mind? Can we just close this?
Yeah.
A little bit? Crew out there listening, we've just got an epic legend of a whippersnipper next door. We need to lock ourselves in this sweat box.
It's the sound of the Aussie summer, mate. See, there's no cicadas anymore, but just leaf blowers.
Oh,
it's strange. That's funny though.
Breaks. Yeah.
But unless you actually actively start looking for little markers about how things have changed. Like when I was a kid growing up, mate, you could not. And I grew up, I was born in Wollongong, did 1 year in Sydney, but from age 6 onwards, I lived in Foster. You could not hear yourself think in summer for cicadas. They were everywhere.
Yeah.
Christmas beetles were everywhere, mate. They were plague proportions. But where are they? Bogong moths, where are they? Man. It's like, it's so different. That was the sound of an Aussie summer to me, was cicadas. And you just, they're still around, but you just don't hear them like you used to.
Yeah.
In the same kind of deafening way.
Bird life,
yep.
Skinks. Those little lizards everywhere when I was growing up. Swamp snakes.
Yep. There's all sorts, and it's slow creep. And there's all sorts of different terms for it. Like one's called landscape amnesia, where you kind of, over time, you kind of lose memory of what it used to be like, and generation to generation that slips, like to what you accept as the normal state of an ecosystem and how things are. That slips generation to generation, and even within a generation it slips. And you really just don't know, how good it was, and you lose track of it. But it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm a super. Emotional guy, very sentimental, very nostalgic, super empath, and so just thinking back to even images of that, I feel super emotional. Just to how I grew up, and how much I learnt from Mother Nature growing up when I didn't even know I was learning, but just being. And
Yeah.
I grew up pre-internet, pre-screen.
Yep.
And so all you had was your three mates in a cubby house. You know, like before land was cleared, it was bush, and you're out there just like grabbing scrap pieces of wood and sheet metal and just building shit.
Yeah, totally. And that's it. Yeah, that's the Australian way, and it's been that way for a long time. Like where I grew up, we were right at the end of Foster, and we bought our place kind of. We were 50 yards from the beach, but also probably a couple of 100 yards from the national park, and it was just these three mountains that just. It's Cape Hawke, so it goes all out, and there's no one there.
Yeah.
And we had that as a playground. It was like, mate, you could fish, dive, surf, do the whole thing. You just hang in it all day. Yeah. It was crazy.
And what is it now? Has it changed?
No, it hasn't changed at all.
Okay.
It's actually got better. You know, and this because they actually grazed. They had cattle grazing on part of it, and they've ripped them out of there, and so a lot of it's grown back and started to resemble a more a natural state, and it's still untouched. It's like, and this is, you know, and this is what every Australian kind of wrestles with. You see the fires and you see all the, you know, and this real darkness comes over. And you go, man, it's like, is this what it's going to be like? And but then you walk out and you see something like that, you know, and you're right. It's like, okay, it's the balance between dark and light.
Yeah,
and anyone who's involved in like any kind of activism, it's particularly environmental, you kind of go through this all the time. Yeah. You kind of really you think the worst but hope for the best, and you get reminders of both.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And you just got to wrestle with it. But mate, I think on the whole in Australia we're so fucking damn lucky.
Yeah.
But that puts extra pressure on us.
Yeah.
Because like you've travelled, you know, like you go around the rest of the world, mate, you don't get coastline like this.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like...
It's a deeper responsibility.
It's a deeper responsibility. Yeah. Like you got to...
And we should be a leader in renewables.
Yeah.
And research and...
Mate, we should just be...
We're the last ones to the party.
We've got it this good. Yeah. Like we've got a job to actually keep it this way. Otherwise it just becomes like everywhere else.
Yeah. I want to go there. So... Where did all this kickstart, Shauno, with conservation? And was there a catalyst moment for you where you were like, well, I want to take a stand? Obviously, you grew up a surfer, Foster, Gong, Newey, loved it.
I've kind of, for a long time, I've wanted to try and get some kind of like activism game going. It's like, but, you know, like as I explained, for surfers in particular, for the past probably 20 years, like in my time growing up as a surfer, it's not really a big thing, activism. You know, and it's simple. It's why it hasn't been. We've just had it too fucking good. It's like, it's really, we have lived such a charmed life on such a really beautiful coastline that we haven't had much to fight against. So that being the case, it never was a big thing. Like I do remember as a kid, and it's funny when we were surfing this back beach. Anyone who's been at Foster knows a place called Janie's Corner, but there's another beach around from that. And when we were growing up, the sewage works were over the back, and my brother and I were there surfing one day they call it Shark Beach, is the name of the back beach. And sitting out there, fun little waves. I just heard, in the middle of it, just heard this big gurgle, and all of a sudden, from right where the pipe comes out, this huge cloud of fucking untreated sewage just starts pumping out, and it's just like. And we're just in the middle of it, and it just stunk to like, as you'd probably imagine. And he and I just looked at each other and just gone, what the fuck? So we're righto. I said, this should not be happening. We ran straight home, got glass jars, paddled back out, scooped it up with the Grogans in it, the whole deal. Took it in the car, stopped first at the local paper on the way, got photographs with it all, got interviewed for a story. It ran on the cover of the paper the next week, and we went straight from the newspaper office to the council and dropped the jars on the front desk and said, can we see someone? And that was, but we had that sense already, you know. And again, I think that it tracks back, and it's a common thing in Australia. You got it that good when something threatens it in that way, mate. It's not even a conscious decision. It's more instinct.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to just go off. It just happens.
Yeah.
That you're going, well, I'm just going to going to go and stop this
Yeah.
because it's not right.
How old
And-
were you guys when that story happened?
Probably 16, 17.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty young. So,
Love that.
yeah.
Just punk rock kids,
Yeah.
just renegades.
Well, mate, Maroubra, it's like,
Yeah.
you've seen it there with Malabar, and it's like, and that's what you think back. That was probably the last time surfers really got on the front foot collectively as a big group and fought something. It was when all the ocean outfalls were in their golden days,
Yeah.
pumping shit out like Malabar and then North Head at Manly, and you had them. And they had them all up and down the coast, and it's just rad to think that. That was only 20 years ago that we were pumping shit into the ocean and swimming in it.
Yeah. Because I think what the world realises is that surfers had this intimate connection with the ocean, with the Great Mother. And so I think we have a first-hand testimony of what the ocean means to us because we're so close in proximity with it. It's an intimate dance that we have with the ocean. And so like for me now as a millennial, I feel like it nearly goes hand in hand to some degree with surfers and activism. It's one. It's like there's not one surfer who was against the Fight for the Bight protests.
Nah. It's, yeah.
And they all knew about it. They were there. All their mates were there.
Yeah.
Like,
And it completely reawakened that whole, it switched back on that gene that sits inside all surfers and goes, well, okay, it's like we need to get back onto this. And it was pretty rad. It was pretty rad to see that sense that they're compelled to do something that hadn't completely gone away.
Yeah.
And yeah, mate, we've seen what a huge force it could potentially be. And I reckon it's only scratched the surface, really. The bike campaign and the things that have happened around it are you're just getting started, I think.
Awesome, man. I'd love to go there with the Fight for the Bight stuff. And so how did you first start getting involved with being a bit of a whistleblower on the matter?
Yeah, well, it was an odd one because we started through my work at Patagonia. We saw this thing pop up. This is in 2016 when BP were down there.
Yeah.
So Equinor hadn't even turned up at this stage. And we looked at this thing and just gone, we're looking at it just going, and that spill modelling was there at that point still, so you could see what would happen if something went wildly wrong. And we're looking at it just going, why is fucking no one talking about this? Yeah. It's like, this is huge. And no one was there. And I had a few mates living down there at that point. And so we just started doing a bit more time down there and working in with the groups, the Fight for the Bight groups down there. And then it was slow going for 2 years, 3 years. It was still, because you think about it, mate, it's like not a lot of crew go down there. It's a fucking long way away. And it's removed, like we're up here in Byron, and that's what people think the Australian coast looks like, It's green, it's mountainous, it's, white sand. It's like the Bight is in a lot of ways kind of it's different. It's dry. It's, edge of the desert in places. It's cliffs. It's rocky. It's raw. It's really removed from that East Coast consciousness. So, and that's why it was really hard to get traction for that issue with all the people here on the East Coast, because hardly anyone goes there, and it's just a very different state of mind,
Yeah, like you're only going to be. Like to go to Cactus, you have to be a surfer.
Oh, mate,
there's nothing.
You have to really want to.
Like 7 months ago, it's like I've been there twice in my life, but like the first time I went there, I was like 7 or something. Went back there, and I'm like, it's full on like Mad Max.
Yeah,
it's like post-apocalyptic, nothing there.
Yep, it's crazy, and it's made for if you've grown up on the East Coast, it's confronting. Yeah. It's like when we first started doing serious time, it's fucking confronting. Because it's so raw and there's no one around and you're just in the back of your mind, whenever you're surfing, you're thinking of sharks. Yeah. And it's like extreme ocean, but it's just wild, Did you get that sense? Like when you went down there, like how different it was to the East Coast?
Energy. Like I found it really reflective. Like I found it like a haunting, meditative vibe down there. My mates and I, because it was actually the week that I was supposed to get married.
Oh,
And
really?
So it was pretty heavy. Chrissy and I went together. We were on this breakup phase. We didn't think we were going to get back together. And so all of her family from America were out.
Yeah.
So I'm like, fuck, I'm getting out of Sydney.
Where's the furthest place I can go? Cactus.
10 hours from Adelaide. We turned off our phones. We were just like reading books, just surfing castles
Yeah.
and caves. And then we were just cooking our baked beans and nachos and whatever and just chilling under the stars and our swags. So it was really spiritual. So for me, my reflection is like, it's pristine down there. Like the water just feels different.
Yeah.
There's so much life in the ecology down there. And I just, I just love the space. And I feel like people that travel there, like Sejuna and that little part, like they go back like every year. It's like their little Mecca experience. All these old stories of like, you know, some big fish out there in the lineup and just everyone's just super reflective.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just think those big, wide, flat horizons, you know,
Yeah.
just put you in that state of mind where and the fact you're just so removed from everything, like you said, you know, there's hardly any phone coverage. You don't see, you know, we'll go down there, you'll drive for a day and see 3 cars, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's just what it is. It's just big and empty, and it just puts a broom through all your thoughts and just lets you kind of reconnect with a place like that.
Honestly, man, it was pretty special how the universe kind of aligned everything to work because, like, early this year, like, I was such a wreck. So early 2019, freshly single from, like, organising a wedding. Chrissy and I were off. I had to fix some, like, I had to really acknowledge some mental health stuff that was really off for me, some flow that wasn't happening and some individual trauma that we had to kind of reflect on, whatever. And so I just went on this journey. I had so much time, so I went and visited Kyle. I was like, Kyle, I've got to get out of Sydney for a while. I'll play bass for you for free for a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And then on that trip, Damo Cole, who was one of the forerunners for the campaign for the Fight For The Bight protests, he gave me a call through Dusty Boots to write a song. We hadn't met at that stage. He asked Dusty to write it. Dusty couldn't do it. So it went to me, and I was at Isabel Lucas's house, just staying there, and I was just alone in this like tree house, and I just wrote this song, Can't Take the Ocean Out of Me. 4 weeks later, I go down to
Torquay at Easter. Yeah.
We throw this song together in like 2.5 weeks. It gets mixed in like Chicago, gets sent back to me. Dusty Boots sends down a saxophone solo. I'm editing it in the car. And then I play it. And there's like, I don't know how many thousands of protesters were there that day at Torquay. It was massive.
It was huge. Yeah.
And so I play this, you know, little thing. I was kind of nervous because like all the WSL crew were there. Like John was there, like Ronnie Blakey, like everyone was there. I'd never played the song. I couldn't remember the lyrics. And I thought, you never know with these protests that you're playing for free. There could be a few thousand. There could be 100 people. You don't really know.
Yeah.
But then we just saw the crew rocking up, and I was just like pinching myself, just like I hadn't played a show with my heartbreak for like 3 months.
Yeah,
it's the first thing I'd done.
Chucked in the
So I
deep
get
end.
up in front of like 2,000 people. And so I finished that. I'm paddling out. It was just like one of the most special days for the year. But after that, there's this bald-headed bloke that runs over to me when I'm holding my guitar. And it's Sean Doherty. It's like, mate, I'm here.
Oh, that was-
I've done some work for Patagonia. I'm like, I know your name and da-da-da. And so, but anyway, we start chatting, and I never thought that the relationship would rekindle in this way. And,
Yeah.
and then 6 months later, you give me a phone call that you want to use the song for the Fight For The Bight film. I was with Chrissy, just kind of pinching my arm that this was happening, you know.
Yeah. It's been a bit of a journey, huh?
Yeah, and then we just do a bunch of shows on a tour together. Just Sean emceeing, me playing some music, and so it was just an incredible way to start and end a year, like a very transformational year of my life, man. So I really want to thank you for your belief and your encouragement. And you know, when you go through a huge crisis, you kind of put everything on the table. Like, who am I? What am I doing? It's super existential. Fuck, am I even an artist? I lost so much confidence. I was off social media for like 3 months before the Fight For The Bight stuff happened. So I didn't know what to do with my life. Was I going to stay in Australia? Was I going to move to Sweden? I was confused. So.
Yeah, I don't reckon we're alone either.
Yeah.
In that thing getting a kind of a life of its own and dragging people into it and dragging people along, and I think it's given a lot of people a better sense of who they are and where they belong in the country
Yeah.
You know, where they belong in their own head.
Yeah.
And given them a little bit of confidence to get on the front foot with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And actually speak up for what they believe in. Because it's, like I said, there's been that disconnect for quite a while.
Yeah.
We've been happy just to go along and do what we do.
Yeah.
But I think like you said, that was the perfect example for you. You know, you said you're at this vulnerable point where, you know, you've had a bit of shit on and then you turned up and there's 3,000 people there.
Yeah.
But, mate, how fucking good did you feel when that song finished and the whole crowd just lit up and everyone just paddled out? It was
man.
Suddenly it's like we're all, you know, there was a huge communal sense that this was something really good and important and that we needed to do it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just wherever it's gone since.
Yeah,
it's just tapped into that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's a lot of people go, you know, one of the criticisms with all the paddle outs and stuff, they go, well, you know, what's it going to change?
Yeah.
You know, these guys are going to make these decisions anyway, and they're not going to, you know, they're not going to listen to a bunch of surfers paddling out, and we're easily dismissed. You know, 'cause people can go, oh, they're just surfers. It's like, but in saying that, what it does is, on a personal level, you get in that group and everyone's there for the same reason. It's hugely empowering, you know. Whether it wins this thing down the Bight or not, we don't know. Like, you know, we've had one decision go against us. It may or may not happen in the future, but it's a huge win, you know, collectively 100%. And personally for people who've been involved with it.
Yeah, man. I think that I think that's part of the Australian, not the tall poppy, but just like, oh, the protests don't do anything anyway.
Yeah.
That mentality, but I think it's a spiritual thing. I think it's when there's a collective consciousness when people come together. The spirit of togetherness when you're out there with everyone paddling out. Like, I paddled out with like 8,000 or so this year, like over 3 different paddle outs, and
mate, you're like the best on ground with all the. You've probably done more of them than anyone. You and Damo, mate. You've done dozens of them.
But it's the same, like big or small paddle outs, it's the same energy.
Yeah.
And I think there is just this heightened sense of awareness. I'm no yogi levitator, but it's just out there are young grommies that are going to be massive influences one day. And it's like, once you see, you can't unsee.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like, you know, seeing poverty one time in your life in India, it's a good thing for your soul because you realise what you have. And you realise the injustice, like just to be there and to see, just being proxy.
Yep.
And so, and, you know, like I feel like what has been galvanised is going to be something massive for our future for conservation, for sure.
Yeah. And I've always said that.
Even if we don't see it now.
Yep. And I've said that all along. Look, I knew in all reality, like the Bight thing, we were probably long odds to win it. Yeah. It's just because of who you're up against. You're up against the whole system, and a system that's operated like that since time immemorial. You're up against billions of dollars. You're up against huge companies, and we're just a group of crew from the coast. So, but on the long game, it's like, man, there's a win coming in some point by bringing all these people together. Yeah, and I've always believed in that, and I've always, you know, that's why when I got the news that they'd got an approval on this Bight, well, like I didn't wake up in, you know, under a dark cloud. I kind of knew, because I kind of knew.
Position.
Yeah, I totally rocking. I've done, and I've probably over the course of a few years been in that fetal position a few points. But man, I knew it was probably coming. But I've accepted that there's a greater good as well coming out of it, and really accepted that I need to focus on that as well. And it's
like the big media outlets aren't talking about it, and they're not really allowed to. And Rupert and his boys, you know, they've got their holdings, their trappings, and so it's like, but that's the power of social media now, and these huge influencers that are getting. It's great. Like people know about that story, about that coastline now, but we wouldn't have. Yep, you know,
exactly. So, and it's brought together this huge, this huge group, and it's like I said, it was amazing that so many people like. When it broke in the eastern states, that whole Fight for the Bight, that was amazing. It was like I said, most of those people have never been there and they'll never go there. But just the idea of what it represented and the fact that you could get solidarity between crew on the Gold Coast with crew in the Bight and crew in Torquay, crew on the south coast at Ulladulla, you know, crew in Manly, like crew everywhere. Everyone jumped on it. And it was like, okay, it's like, that's something we can work with here for sure to do some good down the track.
Yeah.
So that's where exactly what we're going to do. We still don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like people are coming to me going like, okay, and people want to do stuff now.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because it's a hard problem to tackle. Like the bite one's easy because it's one thing.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, or it's like, mate, where do you even start?
Mate.
It's
like, and even the seismic testing that's still happening, like just off my home in Newey.
Yeah,
Continues.
totally. Yep.
Still no one's talking about it. It's a whole other issue to address. We've still got Adani.
Yep.
What's happening off West Coast as well. And yeah, but at least there's a conversation now.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And people are more conscious about it. And you see, and as horrific as the fires have been, it's a point in time that you'll look back on in 10 years and go, well, it really shifted people's thinking about what was happening around them. They saw it was real, and then they acted on it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is what you're going to see. We see it today. You were just down the street here.
Yeah.
There's people marching in the streets today, which it's Byron. That happens most days, but but they're also in Sydney and Perth and Adelaide, and people are pissed about this, and they just want something done. There's a lot of frustration out there right now, and
because I feel like now, like for politicians that don't really. It seems like they don't really give a shit, or friends of mine or family, like it still is kind of head in the sand stuff. Like I feel like, do you have a consciousness? Do you have a conscience to be able to say what you're saying? And like people laugh at me still posting about the Fight for the Bight stuff. Like, this Billy's gone fucking hippie shit. But I'm just like, man, like when you see blue whales for the first time, it's a spiritual thing.
Yeah,
it's like you want to see that for your kids, and it has become like, even talking about wanting a future for your kids, it's become like a bit of a corny like rhetoric now, but it's like it still means something to me. And obviously, mate, you being a father yourself, Sean,
it's the reality of it. That's what it is. We've like all of those paddle outs, mate. Half the people to 2/3 of the people there were family groups.
Yeah, dude.
Because that's what it is. And essentially this is what it taps into, and this is where the political system's broken, is all these decisions are made in 3-year terms. They're only making decisions to get themselves re-elected in 3 years' time or 4 years' time. They're not making decisions for 50 years' time.
Yeah.
They're not making decisions for 100 years' time. They're certainly not making them for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Whereas the first Australians here, they had that pretty down.
Yeah.
They had it worked out, that you got to hand something down, not as good as you had, even better than you had it. And better didn't equal richer. Better equal the land in a better state, and that consciousness has just disappeared in the space of a generation or two.
Wow.
It's really just disappeared, and it's disappeared in a cloud of self-interest, and it's just perfectly personified by the government in there at the moment. It only runs on an economic rationale.
Yeah.
It's only about money. It doesn't factor in anything beyond getting themselves elected again at the next election, and they don't care. There's no long game with these guys. And if there is a long game, it's for themselves. It's not for us.
Yeah.
So
I think it's the difference when we see our Kiwi brothers with Jacinda. Like it's just it's a whole other world there. Like let's all move to Wellington, hey?
Oh, mate, we'll just become the West Island. Make Australia the West Island. I'd happily do that. And it's funny because like we've sat there and laughed at New Zealand for so long, and just go, the little cousin across the ditch. But dude, they have just so got it right on every level in terms of policy.
First Nations.
Mate, they've made peace. Yep, made peace with the First Nations. They've incorporated that into their wider culture. So it's indiscernible. It's not like a white culture. It's not a Pakeha culture and a Maori culture. It's like the one thing.
Yeah.
And that's clearly not happening here. Which is just criminal, really.
Yeah.
And then I look at this. The Australians tear themselves up over this whole idea of cultural identity, of who we are, Who are we as Australians, is it mateship? Is it, barbecues? Is it, what is it? It's like, fuck, if we actually just embraced a little more of the first Australian culture back into what we are now. You know, if kids learn a lot more about it growing up and learned the local indigenous dialect in school, just as a subject, so they could converse in it a little bit, and they learn about the land in particular around where they are, just so, and understood the rhythms of it and what it meant to the first Australians and how it actually worked. It would remove all of that cultural cringe that we've got. Because it would actually, you'd have a cultural identity that meant something more than 200 years worth of white colonialism, you know. It'd tap in, you've got this 60,000, 100,000-year-old culture here, the oldest one in existence.
That's still accessible.
And you barely acknowledge it. And it certainly doesn't play any day-to-day role in people's lives. You know, at most you might have a street sign at the end. You might have an Indigenous street sign, but even they're pretty rare, you know. Or you might have, the town might still have its Indigenous name, but you need to go another level deeper. And it would take time, but it would fix a lot of things on our side of the fence and for the first Australians as well.
Yeah. Because I personally, like, coming from a Wabikal country, I know nothing about a Wabikal culture. Specific things of the land, certain ways they thought about family and connection to the land. One of my mantra words for last year was actually Dadiri, which in Eora language means, Gadigal means deep listening.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so just trying to, like, increment by increment, just embed and trying to, like, set an intention to spend more time with elders this year.
Yep.
Just listen to the stories and just receive, because it is part of our culture as well. If we were born in Australia, like, it's also part of our culture.
Yeah.
It's our heritage,
Yep.
which is beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just, and we're kind of cooking it by not acknowledging it and just doing a bit more. And we've seen it, you see it with New Zealand. It makes things so much more harmonious, you know. And it's easy. It's easily done. It's all sitting there.
Wow, dude. Yeah, like, I spent a lot of time going up, like, with little church trips, going to these little Indigenous towns. Like, I went to a place a couple of years called Gadooga. It's close to Walgett.
Okay,
And Lightning Ridge, all those kind of towns, like, and that was some of the most special weeks of my life, was just learning, sitting and learning, face painting, but just listening to stories and just a different way of seeing reality, coming from, like, Newcastle's so white, bro. Like, I hated being brown when I was younger. Like, everyone's just trying to be white, always dreamed of having a white girl, white this, just... But there was a part of me that always wanted to learn and saw there was something deeper to this story, and that, you know, my dad really got me into Blood on the Wattle when I was younger. Yep. I'm starting to read Dark Emu now, but I'm so late to the party, bro.
Yeah. Well, we all are.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, it's exactly what we are. We're late to the party.
Yeah.
But it's not too late. It's like, there's a lot of good stuff out there now.
Yeah.
And a lot of easy entry points to get a better understanding of it. And it's all it takes is just a bit of will, just to an open mind, just to have a look at it.
Because I think for a lot of us as well that come from very, like, oftentimes beautiful conservative Christian families, what we've failed to recognise is that the conditioning runs so deep as far as white colonialism, white man's God, white man's theology. Yeah. And so anything else outside the gospel is heresy, animism, pagan. And so trying to peel back and just go, like, wait, all this weird superstition that I've inherited, like, how can I just look at some of these concepts from a whole new perspective and just be open and soft?
Yeah.
To this 60,000-year-old wisdom that has been here and lasted. And it seriously would cure Australia's cultural cringe. Wow.
Totally. If we just embraced it a little more. And it's, like I said, it's there. It's, it's just one step at a time, just little steps.
Sean, I just want to go to the fires. We've got, like, a few things to talk about before we close up, and I'm just so sick of all these bloody greenies, like, that won't let us backburn.
Didn't you start a couple of those fires, Bill?
They caught me. Rupert and his boys caught me.
Oh, mate. It's seriously, and it's
how did that even become a thing? How did that become like one of the biggest backlashes of response to the resistance to
it was
consciousness.
You know, as kind of as outrageous as you sit there and just think about it now, it was completely predictable.
Yeah.
You know, it was always going to happen that the forces lined up against wanting to do anything about climate change and the money lined up against wanting to do anything about climate change would just start muddying the waters straight away, and it'd be about fuel loads and fucking arson and that's what you'd be talking about because they want...
Even the numbers on the arsonists has been super inflated, right? From what I understand.
Yeah. Well, they throw this number out. There was 180 arrests, but I think 120 of those were like on the spot fines for dropping a cigarette. And so, and like you say the word arson, and that's why it's got so much power, and it's why it gets used in the media.
Yeah.
Because you immediately think of some little fucking pyromaniac who just runs around like maliciously lighting fires everywhere, deliberately to burn shit down. And it's like, and it's not. Most of those things they're just careless. You know, it's some guy using an angle grinder or someone dropping a durry on the road, and you know, putting a campfire out on a total fire ban day. That's kind of what most of those things are. Yeah. And that's all. Like in the last few days, all the you know, the police chiefs and the fire chiefs have come out and just go, well, it's a crock of shit. Yeah. It's, you know, most of the fires were lightning strikes, but the real issue, you're going to have ignitions everywhere anyway. That's kind of life. You know, there is fire everywhere in where humans are. The problem is the fact we've had the hottest, driest year in record, and everything is bone dry, and any kind of fire is gonna go nuts. Yeah,
the 4 last hottest years, right?
Yeah. Well, mate, pretty much the last 20. I think the last 20 years globally contain, and don't hold me to this, I think 16 of the hottest years.
16
on record.
Years on record.
In Australia, I can speak for Australia. Australia, 2019 was the hottest and driest year on record since they've kept records here in Australia, and that's Bureau of Meteorology data. Which even the fucking trolls have a go at that. They go, well, you know, it's a conspiracy. The Bureau of Meteorology, you know, that they're after grants and things, and the more extreme they make their results. But that's what last year was. It was the hottest, driest year ever on record. Yeah. In December, we had in consecutive days, I think it was this first, second, third, were the 3 hottest days on record in Australia when they measure the average heat across the whole continent. I think it went 40.9, 41.6, 41.9. Yeah. And that's over the whole of that's averaged out over the whole of Australia. Wow. Which is just rad when you think about it. The continent was that hot at that point. And it's, mate, if you can't, you know, if none of that makes sense to you, it never will. Yeah. It's
Well, what's it going to take? Like when it comes to these fires, and like we're right in the middle of it, like it's not going to end any day soon.
Yeah, we kind of, with the fires, we're dealing with the immediacy of it. It's still burning today. You know, there's another, 20, 40, 50 knot change coming overnight somewhere down South Coast. So and South Australia is still burning. So that's what it is now. But in the middle of that is emerging kind of the wider conversation as to why these things have happened and what it's going to take to stop them happening again, and let the games begin, because that's when it's going to get really, really contested. And we're seeing that already. Like,
do you feel like Scotty from Marketing Speech is kind of changing about climate change? In like the last couple of interviews, it kind of seems like he made this statement of there's no doubt that there's a contribution of, you know, these things, and climate change is one of those. And so do you feel like his rhetoric is kind of changing a little bit?
No, he's a rabid political animal. He is you look at his history, he's a rabid political animal, and he will say and do whatever he needs to. He'll say just enough to keep the heat off from the crew who want something done about climate change. It'll just like we're meeting our Kyoto targets, which Kyoto targets are Paris target. They're bullshit. They're complete bullshit. We're actually producing more greenhouse gas now. So our emissions aren't dropping at all. No. So all this stuff, he was interviewed last night, and there was lies all through it. You know, we're the number one renewable, per capita investor. We're not. We're at 4 or 5, and it's trailing off the investment because these guys are here throwing huge money at fossil fuel projects.
Yeah.
So it's all he'll say whatever he needs to get him through this, because he's on the run right now. All this weird shit with him and the handshakes and Hawaii, it's just like it's blowing my mind. I just I'm looking at it just going, it looks like one of those movies. You see one of those movies where the alien comes down and takes over someone's body, but they've got no idea how to operate it, and it's like, or what social kind of,
like
how to
Tom
act
Cruise gets dubbed for that.
Yeah, or how to act socially.
Yeah,
and, it's like, I'll shake hands with this human creature. It's like, they're not shaking my hand, I'll grab
Read
their
the
hand.
textbook on how to be human.
It's like,
but isn't a human, yeah.
It's crazy. It's like some weird reptilian shit that's going on. And it's just, I'm looking at it just going, mate, if it wasn't so serious, it'd be fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
And this guy is just doing this. But like I said, he's a political animal, mate. He's going to dig in around this, and his party will dig in, and it'll be really hard to dislodge him. You haven't got an election till 2022, so you got no chance till then to get rid of them. So you've just got to mitigate the damage they can do in this time. Stuff like the bite stuff, it's great, mate. They put the brakes on them. You've just got to delay. At some point, all of this stuff will not only become just wrong environmental, it'll just be wrong morally. And the longer you can keep them, you can just push them out.
Yeah.
That day, there's a day coming where all of this stuff, even economically, fossil fuels won't make any sense, and that's coming quickly. So the more we can kind of stall these guys, the better.
Yeah. You said about the immediacy with these fires right now. Obviously, we're raising millions, for the fireys, for relief. But what do you think about the conversation about regeneration? Because I feel like that's something the government's not talking about right now. It's like, okay, it's these Band-Aid solutions of like, get some water, splash it.
Yep.
But what next?
And
And after that dopamine's run out, when the person's donated,
yep.
and they're like, okay, I've done my bit, but like, fuck, we just...
What's the long-term fix?
Nearly 1 billion animals that have died?
Yeah.
And so,
Dude,
it might take 10 years to recover, maybe.
Yep.
For our ecosystems.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's, and you can go back to, and they'll roll out all the familiar tropes. Australian bush, it does this every time. It regenerates. It's designed to be burnt, and it is designed to be burnt. That's how it's actually evolved that way, but it hasn't evolved to be burnt the way it just got burnt. And if you put a second fire back through a fire that hasn't even regenerated, it's like, and particularly when you talk about fauna, that takes decades. They take decades to get back, and they need good years, a lot of good years between these crazy years to actually rebuild populations in all sorts of stuff. And we've got no sense of what we've even lost yet in terms of your ecosystems, let alone kind of what that is going to look like in 10 years' time. But if you get successive years of this stuff, we're fucked. It's like that's the crazy thing. And you look at the numbers, that's what it is. All these hot years are just bookending together, one after the other. So what was like a once in a 50-year or 100-year fire might be once in 10 or once in 5. And then stuff just doesn't get a chance to recover. Generate. And you just don't, and that just happens for long enough, and you're just going to lose great parts of it. So there's short-term issues to deal with, and getting people back on their feet and making sure that this doesn't happen, that we're ready at least in terms of a response if these fires happen again. Because that's been the other shit show, is you've had these governments just rip millions out of the capabilities of rural fire services, all of this. So they haven't had the tools to deal with a fire like this, and they ignored all the warnings and didn't invest and just said, no, it's fine. And the place burnt. And so they've got to learn those lessons first. And then the next lesson is, what's going to stop the fires like that? And then what are you going to do about these year-on-year temperature records? You can't go on forever like this.
Because it hits home when whole towns are going to have to shut down.
Yep. It's happening out west already.
Yeah.
They're just out of water. There's no water there. So if you don't have water, you don't have a town. And that's happening. You're getting that dislocation already. People already, like that was the first time I saw in this thing that, the term, climate refugees were getting used in terms of Australia. This is like, you're not talking about Jakarta or you're not talking about Bangladesh where it's low-lying and in inundation. It's like it's climate refugees who won't be able to go back to where they just came from because it won't be safe, because stuff's changed. And that's here in Australia.
Yeah.
Which is fuck. And then like you look at Jakarta, like the Indonesians already, they're moving Jakarta. Did you know that?
No.
They are going to relocate Jakarta to the other side of Borneo.
What?
Yep. Already in motion. Because Jakarta's like essentially built on swampland. And it's one of the lowest lying capital cities in the world. And they're already planning to move it. So,
But swampland meaning that it's going to be vulnerable
to inundation, but to sea level rise.
Oh my goodness.
So, and this stuff's happening like around the world. And I think we got a stark reminder that we're not immune to it, and particularly seeing we're one of the worst contributors in terms of what we're doing, and certainly per capita, but just in terms of the look of it.
Wow.
And the way we're talking about it is, that's why the world's interested in this. They're looking at Australia's fires going, well, you've got these dickheads running the place who walk into Parliament with a lump of coal and 2 years later their country burns. Yeah. They're drawing a straight line between the two because it is a straight line. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
I wanted to ask you, man, you've got such incredible life and so many stories, and like I live in Maroubra and very proud to live. I love waking up to Maroubra. I surf every day, get my turmeric lattes from Johnny, and there's so many cool stories, and there's so many people from all over the world that live there now. It's changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years, but you spent a bit of time there. And so you wrote a book about the Abson brothers.
I did. I've done a lot of time there.
So crew, Bra Boys, did you see the film? It was amazing.
Shaun
with his speed dealer Sonny's, he was in it.
Yeah. No, we did the book with the boys back. I think it was like published in 07, I think it was. So yeah, probably like Maroubra really different now to what it was then, but it was changing back then anyway. Yeah. There was a lot of money coming into the place. It was a beautiful suburb. Like it had a lot of concrete around it, but just even with the rifle range out there and just the beach itself, it's still probably like the best surfing beach in the eastern suburbs.
Yeah, definitely.
Am I saying all the right stuff, you Bill? Or I should say it's the worst. I'll send them all to Bronny instead. But it was cool. It was like it was an interesting study just to be in the middle of all of that and all the drama and all the the shit that was going on there. But just to
can you kind of inform some of our listeners of what is the story? What was the catalyst for some of this activity and reactivity to occur?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, the suburb of Maroubra has always been pretty rough, always going back as long as there's been kind of white fellas living there. But it had a real reputation for kind of rough crew, but also like a larrick. It also had the flip side of that. There was like a larrikin element to it as well, where it was well-meaning, but it was just extreme well-meaning, where it was you had to I think they were running at that point, the Bra Boys were running with the slogan "hated and proud," which summed them up pretty perfectly. But it was it was a pretty wild place. And then the book obviously is around the Aberdeen brothers. There's four of them: Sonny, Jai, Kobe, and Dakota. It was more at the three older boys at that point. Of course, all three of them are amazing surfers. Great, like you've seen, obviously, Kobe's exploits. He was probably at that time he was the biggest surfer in the world. He was doing all his slab stuff. He was just
when you say the biggest surfer in the world, that's a big call.
Yeah, totally. Well, mate, he was in that because I was running surf mags. I was running tracks at that point. I think we ran 1 year. He was on the cover 4 times, and pretty much but that was every mag around the world. He was just
Was it mainly for slabby, throaty,
Yep.
big-ish wave? Like, was he? Yeah, because like he's kind of known from my generation as being like a charger.
Yep. He was the charger.
The charger.
Yep. And that was one element of him. And the other one was just his personality. It was just like fucking just like full on and just like completely unfiltered, just said whatever was on his mind, which made, if you're running magazines, it's awesome because he's going to he'll tell you exactly what he thinks and then 10% on top of that as well. And that's his nature, you know, and it was never boring. But these guys had come from a rough background. Their mum had been a heroin addict her whole life and they'd lived with their grandmother for most of it.
Apparently Kobe's dad was pretty rough.
Yeah, well, they never.
Oh, was it his wife? Mum's boyfriend.
Yeah, mum's boyfriend.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and they went through all these heavy households as kids, and never knew their dads. And apparently, different dads for all of them. But then you had around that the wider group of Maroubra, it was just full on, you know, because there was like the Lexo Housing Commission block was just up the road, and there was a real kind of, you know, there was also a criminal element around town that was pretty strong.
Yeah.
Like Long Bay was just up the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, there was always that element hanging around with the hardcore surf element as well, and the lines kind of mixed a bit, and the Bra Boys are in the middle of it. Yeah. But yeah, then it you know, obviously it came to a head when Jai ended up shooting a guy called Anthony Hines over, who was Heinzie was one of the gnarliest guys. He was one of the top dogs in Long Bay when he'd done time up there. So it's heavy guys, but also a Maroubra guy as well. And then had a falling out. He was after Jai, wrestled over a gun, and then Heinzie got shot. Went before court, Jai got acquitted on self-defense. And so, but you imagine all of this happening in the middle of the whole Bra Boys mania thing. Yeah. And the papers were just feeding on it.
Because that was covered in the film, right?
Yep. Yeah, it was all on the other side of the film. Yeah. Yep. And so Jai was acquitted for self-defense. But suddenly having that happen on top of Kobe being Kobe at that point, because Kobe was at the height of his powers. And then all the Bra Boys, and it was just a weekly thing, you know, there was trouble, like they'd get into trouble somewhere else, and the papers just fed on it and they inflamed it, and then it kind of, you know, a lot of the Bra Boys crew kind of ran with it as well, because it was suddenly like, you know, there was a platform there. Everyone knew who they were, and that kind of escalated as well. But then, like anything does, you know, it's tapered off, and those guys got older. Yeah, and
dad bods, had kids.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, most of them are all still pretty in gnarly condition, and they're all, because that's what they do. They, you know, they're just full on. The energy just never runs out in that place with those guys. That's surfing, training, you know, jiu-jitsu, and it's going out. And
I bumped into Richie Vass like a few months ago, stretching at the beach. Like, lovely guy.
Yep. And that was the group, mate. I loved hanging out with those crew. Yeah. You know, it was heavy times because there was a lot of shit, and they were trouble with the cops every 5 minutes.
Wow.
At that point, because the cops, they had big targets on them, on the Bra Boys, and which they probably deserved for the most part. But it was just it was full on. But at the heart of most of those guys, they were big-hearted guys, and probably too big-hearted in a lot of ways, in that they do anything for their mates. But it was a really interesting exercise to get to know those guys and be in the middle of it, and I still speak to pretty much all of them, you know, at certain times, and they're still around. It, like I said, you just get older. You get older, a bit wiser. You're not going to chase trouble as much. You're going to try and avoid it. Most of them have got families. Like Kobe's got kids now. He's living in Indo.
When I was surfing Desert Point for the first time when I was 22, yeah, a bunch of the crew were there, all the tats and everything, but they kind of just let me hang out with them. One of their guys was starting Bra Boys School of Surf.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but yeah, just legends. They kind of just took me in.
Yeah.
I was just surfing because I was alone. I was just kind of like just looking for crew, you know?
Yeah.
We're always getting the same jaffles, always the same gutto, the same, warong. And, but yeah, man. So writing that book, you were spending like 2 years kind of hovering around there. You weren't living in Maroubra though.
No, I was across the bridge at DY.
At
that point. Yeah, it would have cost my sanity, I think, living in Maroubra at that point. It was because it was really tense. Like there's a real tension about it.
Yeah,
as well.
Sure.
And those guys kind of were really feeling as well. And you just couldn't, as an outsider, you just couldn't deal with too much of it.
And so I think as a writer, as an observer, and as a really relational human, like coming closer with the boys, I don't know, like what did you see as far as like, obviously part of the Bra Boys story is part of my story. Like, like I feel when I see even the film, like I see part of myself, like this search a bit for identity.
Yep.
I've got a pretty broken relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
And just this connection, like I began to kind of resonate a little bit. And were there certain patterns that you saw and just, an insight into humanity?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. They were, the thing that really struck me about them is they weren't that different because like you look at surf and subcultures everywhere, and they tend to be pretty insular, pretty territorial and pretty extreme in their own ways wherever they are. But the Bra Boys had just turned it up to, it had gone past 10. It was on to about 25 by that point. It was just so full on. But they felt it. They were carrying on a tradition as well of that extreme behaviour from the generations above them as well. They felt a sense of duty to carry it on.
Yeah.
And so they were bigger they want to be bigger rat bags than anyone, surf bigger waves, charge harder, cause more mayhem. And that's what it was for that point in time. But they weren't that different, and they're completely relatable and also, misunderstood in a lot of ways because they're painted in the press obviously as this surf gang and it was, violent surf gang but also like they were also really open and accepting, particularly to crew from overseas, from other places. Really open. And then you had the weird dichotomy where Kobe hated boogie boarders, really just hated boogie boarders. But if you came from Brazil or you came from Lebanon, you came in and chat like he or you're a Samoan, they were really multicultural in that way as well. And real,
but funny, they kind of got dubbed as being racist with the Lebanese riots.
Yeah, well, that was because they got towed into that. Well, Kobe towed him into that by talking to the papers, and then the papers interpreted it one way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so suddenly,
and that's how it was perceived even from Newey. We're like,
and then when Cronulla happened,
the
next night it happened in Maroubra. They just moved up there, and it was all on the back of Kobe talking to the papers and the papers presenting it one way and then so the Lebanese crew just straight in.
Yeah.
But then it all like they sorted it out between themselves. And that was they were actually pretty dirty that they'd been towed into it when the reality of kind of how they actually act day to day is they're really multicultural. Mate, there's heaps of Islander crew in there. There's heaps of crew from
mixed.
A lot of mixed, like, a lot of like there's Middle East crew, there's all sorts of crew, half of them are Canterbury supporters, so it's like, and the other half is South. It's like there's this weird, like a lot of indigenous crew in there, so they all got chucked in there together. So it was less about kind of where they'd come from in terms of their ethnic background and more just about, it was more the Maroubra state of mind, where just go hard.
Sean, you definitely have a way with people. Like as soon as I met you, I felt really comfortable. And I think you have a really deeply relational element. I remember you saying to me before that somehow, like one thing that you're kind of good at is connecting with people, still being a writer, still being a journo, but still being, part of that kind of crew without them feeling like there's some dude coming in and posing and trying to tell a biased story of their life.
Yeah, well, it's like it's a bit of a, if you're trying to write like deeper stories about people and getting to know kind of what really makes them tick, you kind of need to be there, but you need to not be there at the same point. So you need to be around them, but you need to not actively try and be in part of, like try and just pull yourself back just a little bit so you can watch it and this crew interact with the crew so they know you and get to a point where they trust you at least to open up about stuff that they wouldn't open up to other people. And it's generally a product of time as well. So you need to do time with a lot of these people. That's why the Bra Boys thing was a couple of years, and I had to do like a lot of sessions in the Maroubra Bay pub, like a lot of sessions surfing with those guys, and you kind of had to just be there.
Yeah.
And by osmosis over time, they just trust you to tell, at least be honest about what you're going to write about them. Yeah. Hawaii's another perfect example of that, because you got to be careful with what you write about Hawaii.
Yeah.
And trying to be honest about what's happening without, getting your teeth removed. It can actually be kind of hard at certain times. Yeah. You've got to do the dance a little bit, and you've got to invest time to know people and get them to at least know who you are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not be so big.
Yeah.
Try and make yourself out to be this grandiose figure, and they're going to want to take you down. They don't trust you. You kind of just, you just have to stay close enough, but not too close.
Have you done any work within the male mental health kind of realm? Have you had a voice in that at all?
I haven't. I probably did a little bit indirectly when the Peterson book came out, which was quite a while ago now. But that was, at that point, of course, this is Michael Peterson's book, and he'd been off the scene for a long time by this point, and it was all schizophrenia. So he developed schizophrenia in the end of the 70s and then disappeared, and so a lot of that book was about schizophrenia and how that actually translates and his life and how the schizophrenia kind of directed it. And there wasn't, when that came out, there wasn't a huge understanding about schizophrenia at all. Like when I started writing it, I just thought it was some trigger in your mind that
when did he kind of tap out from the scene? And
early 80s or 83.
Cool.
Yep.
Wow.
He was undiagnosed till 83. So and that was when
a conversation. It wasn't acknowledged, and even male vulnerability, 60s, 70s, post-war kids, boomer.
Exactly. Well, schizophrenia generally comes with a drug habit as well, because what schizophrenia is, it's your senses and your brain playing tricks on you. So your brain interprets hearing things that aren't there, or seeing things, or particularly thinking things that aren't there, and so you do get these crazy ideas, and it's pretty insidious, that disease, because that's what it does. It, like, your own brain plays tricks on you, and you can't, you trust it, but you don't trust it as well. And no one knew it was around, but he was undiagnosed till 83. By which stage, he had to go to jail for that to happen, and then within a few months he'd had shock treatment to deal with it, and it was only a rudimentary understanding then. So even when the book came out 20 years later, people still didn't really know, and myself included, didn't really know exactly how it worked and what it was. And so it was a real education for me. And I think that was the one, the one thing that came out of that book, was there was, amongst the crew who read it, was a better understanding of...
Sorry, Sean, when did you release that book?
2004.
Okay.
I think it was. Yep.
Trying to keep up.
So it was a while ago now, though. It was like,
fuck,
I'm getting old now. But that was 04.
Yeah.
So, but it was good. It was like, for me, it was a huge education.
Yeah.
To have to understand.
And even like a revelation for you, because it wasn't talked about with his career, or was it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, he was they're always been really secretive about it, because, and that's a product again of it not being understood. So, because no one understood what was wrong with him. Like, they didn't fully understand at the start, and no one really understood, and there wasn't a lot of kind of empathy out there for it, because there was no understanding. And so he basically he hid from the world for 20 years, and so he was still around obviously at the time. So we were interviewing for the book. So I had to we did a lot of face-to-face time, and he was really reluctant about doing it. Didn't really want to do it. But the family wanted a record of it. And so we stuck at it, and I kind of, just through again, it's that time thing, persistence of just being there, and I'd walk in and go, here he goes. But then over time I'd find stuff he'd like to talk about, and we'd talk about that first, and then we'd drift onto stuff that I needed to talk about for the book a bit more. But he was super sharp as well, that was, he wasn't, this guy was beset with mental illness and fragile, and mate, he was still completely shrewd. He was still playing the game, but it was just, he just had this thing hanging around and that he had to deal with.
At what point did you become friends with Andy Irons?
Well, working in mags, we were we're covering all his exploits. Probably came. I wouldn't even say friends, but we were close, and we could sit there and have conversations, and it was probably it was after his world titles.
Wow.
And so probably it was all more or less when he was in his decline a little more.
Yeah.
But I did through working with Parko a bit, and of course he and Parko were best mates. So I saw him a lot in the last couple of years of his life, and I was around the tour a lot in those last couple of years. So I'd see him at all contests, and they were that was when he was dealing with all his shit as well. The stuff we kind of knew about and the stuff we kind of didn't,
It breaks your heart.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, like in the middle of those. For all for how it ended, and as sad as that was, like in the middle of those last couple of years, there were moments where he was really, you just really felt positive for where he was going to end up. And, we did a fair bit of time. At one point here, when he got clean and came over here and hung down, they were staying down at Angourie for weeks on end, and they were putting him down there so he was away from temptation, really. But he was down there surfing, and he was just clear-minded, surfing every day, and you just kind of and like Lindy was there, and just go, right, okay, well, it's all it's cool. He'll beat this, and get away from
what
the
do you
tour.
believe was at the core of his journey, like his core demon that was causing him to make some of these decisions that weren't so helpful?
I think he's just predisposed to chasing stuff like that. Because people can be predisposed to addictions. And he was hardwired to be full on as well. That's why he was such an amazing surfer. But he was also not hardwired to deal with a lot of the bullshit that came with it. Peterson's the same. So because Andy was diagnosed bipolar as a kid. And that wasn't widely known at all. When he was going through all his years on tour, that wasn't like he never publicly acknowledged it.
I get so excited because we are in a time where things are changing when it comes to male connection, openness, vulnerability, and I'm really proud to be part of that kind of change in the tide when it comes to literally, man. When I was younger, I was just told stop being emotional. If I was told I was emotional from my sisters, I just felt so ashamed and defensive, reactive. But it's beautiful that there is a climate of the dawn of the new man, and that it's okay to say that you're not okay.
Yeah, totally.
And, but I just don't think it was a thing 10 years ago, even for myself. Like I think it's just things are open.
Well, even with my age gap to you, it was different again for me growing up. It was like a lot tougher environments that you grew up in. And like, my house is all brothers. So we didn't have, I had my mum there was a really kind of soft, nurturing influence. But everything else was fucking really hard. And you were hard with other people generally. And so even in my lifetime, I've had to kind of take the edge off that a bit, as we've got older. And some of those things, like having to jump into projects like the Peterson one, and that teaches you to be more open and understanding about other people's lives and to be less judgmental and kind of that's certainly helped me along the way. Yeah, and having kids, obviously, that does it for everyone. You know, at some point.
Just a final thought, man, because we've got to wrap up. I've been really thankful for your time. I've had the most incredible chat. And could you pinpoint a moment in your life where there was some kind of personal awakening, a personal renaissance, where something changed?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not one of those guys who kind of forensically looks back at my life a lot. And I do actually there is probably one moment when I actually got into medicine at Newcastle Uni, right, when I left school. Good uni. Too good in a lot of ways. But Newcastle had the best medical school in the country, and I got into it. But they did it, and I had to go down for a grading exam. And I was living at Foster at that point, a couple of hours away, drove down. I was only 17 because I was pretty young for my year. So went in, did the first, it was a full day exam. I did the first half. They had an hour and a half break in the middle of it. I said, right, sweet. I had the board in the car. I said, I'm going to go and have a surf. Didn't realise at that point that the uni was so far out the back of Newcastle that it's like 25 minutes, like 35 in traffic. So I got to the cliff, surfed, waves are pumping, started surfing, kind of realised time was getting away, paddled over to this guy, asked him for the time. the test, second half of the test was starting in 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I kind of sat there and I thought, you know what? I don't want to do medicine anyway. It wasn't expected of me by my mum. It was like, it's just what you did. If you got the marks to do medicine, you did medicine. It's like, fucking mate, that's what you do. And I did, and I right on the spot, I went, you know what? I don't want to be a doctor anyway. I hate blood. I hate the sight of blood. I faint at it. And I probably don't want to have to deal with people day in, day out with problems. It's like, I'd rather just do my own thing. And that's all I've done since then is just do shit I want to do. Yeah. And then, you know, that's why I worked in music for a while, and it's avoiding real, you know, like adult jobs. That's been the one theme in my life is avoiding stuff that seems like, you know, adult jobs. And I worked in surf mags, which is probably the least serious fucking career you could ever go in. But but in the long run, they've turned into serious jobs. Yeah. But that was a real crossroads moment there, and that you could have gone down a straight path. But I wanted to go. Like I grew up in a pretty anarchistic. Like Dead Kennedys, my favourite band. Like we were little punks, and I didn't want to go into a system. You know, I'd rather just do something that was a little more anti-establishment, and maybe that's why I've ended up sitting here as ScoMo's best mate now. So it's like maybe it's come to revisit me, you know, later in life. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good question, Bill.
Yeah, for sure, man. Is there anything because I think just with that, I think you really confronted something awesome of like, you know, there's a certain narrative, get the marks, become a doctor, become a lawyer. It's kind of void of, you know, what's your purpose and what's your thing, and, you know, tuning in to what you really want, your own intuition.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, the generations since, it's a little freer. I think people understand that. And I think kids going through school get a much better taste of other parts of life. Like my daughter's this year is doing a month in the Northern Territory in an Aboriginal community, you know, and that would have been unthinkable when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been unthinkable that the school would actually do that for you, you know. So she's going to go out there and live and work in a community for a few weeks.
Oh man.
And so it's a lot more open-minded, and I think they let people find their own groove a little easier these days. And it's I think it's a result of what you were saying. It's the world's a bit more open. You see more of it. You know, social media, that you see everything, so you know that world's out there.
Yeah.
And it is one of the redeeming features of social media.
And it seems like you love your kids.
Yeah, they're good. drive me fucking nuts occasionally, but don't all kids.
Sean,
they're gold,
it's
mate.
been a pleasure, man. Honestly, thanks so much for having me.
No, I'm going to put a little closing note in here too, mate.
Yeah, come on.
I want to thank you for tagging along on this fucking road trip. It's still going a year later. I don't know when it's going to end. But, yeah, no, you brought a really good energy. And I think you, more than anyone, mate, have summed up kind of what these protests or gatherings or, they're more celebrations than protests. Celebrations of what we've got as opposed to wanting to kick down the doors of the houses. It's the energy you kind of get across is what I really want these things to be, and celebrations of the life we get to live.
Yeah.
And hats off to you, dude.
Yeah, thanks, Shauno. I don't have to go down a whole nother rabbit hole again. I talk too much, but just I think what happened on that whole trip was this thing of like, look, we're here, we're present. It's not about being more polarized. It's not about demonizing more. It's like that energy was so important.
Yeah.
And I really think you brought it out of me. So the froth train, mate. Thanks so much, Shauno.
No worries, mate. Look forward. Fight for the Bight 2 coming next year.
2.0.
We're back on the road, Bill.
You.
Good on you, mate. 20 years later, people still didn't really know, and myself included, didn't really know exactly how it worked and what it was. And so it was a real education for me. And I think that was the one, the one thing that came out of that book was there was, amongst the crew who read it, was a better understanding of...
Sorry, Sean, when did you release that book?
2004.
Okay.
I think it was. Yep.
Trying to keep up.
So it was a while ago now, though. It was like,
fuck,
I'm getting old now. But that was like, 04.
Yeah.
So, but it was good. It was like, for me, it was a huge education.
Yeah.
To have to understand.
And even like a revelation for you, because it wasn't talked about with his career, or was it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, he was they're always been really secretive about it because, and that's a product again of it not being understood. So, because no one understood what was wrong with him. Like they didn't fully understand at the start, and no one really understood, and there wasn't a lot of kind of empathy out there for it because there was no understanding. And so he basically he hid from the world for 20 years, and then he was still around obviously at the time. So we were interviewing for the book, so I had to we did a lot of face-to-face time, and he was really reluctant about doing it, didn't really want to do it. But the family wanted a record of it. And so we stuck at it, and I kind of, just through, again, it's that time thing, persistence of just being there, and I'd walk in and go, here he goes. But then over time I'd find stuff he'd like to talk about, and we'd talk about that first, and then we'd drift onto stuff that I needed to talk about for the book a bit more. But he was super sharp as well, that was, he wasn't, this guy was beset with mental illness and fragile, and mate, he was still completely shrewd. He was still playing the game, but it was just he just had this thing hanging around and that he had to deal with.
At what point did you become friends with Andy Irons?
Well, working in mags, we were we're covering all his exploits. Probably came. I wouldn't even say friends, but we were close, and we could sit there and have conversations, and it was probably it was after his world titles.
Wow.
And so probably it was all more or less when he was in his decline a little more.
Yeah.
But I did through working with Parko a bit, and of course he and Parko were best mates. So I saw him a lot in the last couple of years of his life, and I was around the tour a lot in those last couple of years. So I'd see him at all contests, and they were that was when he was dealing with all his shit as well. The stuff we kind of knew about and the stuff we kind of didn't. And
it breaks your heart.
Yeah, it was. But then, like in the middle of those. For all the, for how it ended and as sad as that was, like in the middle of those last couple of years, there were moments where he was really, you just really felt positive for where he was going to end up. And, we did a fair bit of time. At one point here, when he got clean and came over here, and hung down. They were staying down in Angourie for weeks on end, and they were putting him down there so he was away from temptation, really. But he was down there surfing, and he was just clear-minded, surfing every day, and you just kind of and like Lindy was there, and just go, right, okay, well, it's all, it's cool. He'll beat this, and get away from the tour.
What do you believe is at the core of his journey, like his core demon that was causing him to make some of these decisions that weren't so helpful?
I think he's just predisposed to chasing stuff like that. Because people can be predisposed to addictions.
Yeah.
And he was hardwired to be full on as well. That's why he was such an amazing surfer.
Yeah.
But he was also not hardwired to deal with a lot of the bullshit that came with it.
Yeah.
Peterson's the same. So, because Andy was diagnosed bipolar as a kid.
Yeah.
And that wasn't widely known at all. When he was going through all his years on tour, that wasn't like he never publicly acknowledged it.
Yeah. I get so excited because we are in a time where things are changing when it comes to male connection, openness, vulnerability. And I'm really proud to be part of that kind of change in the tide when it comes to, literally, man, when I was younger, I was just told, stop being emotional.
Yeah.
If I was told I was emotional from my sisters, I just felt so ashamed and defensive, reactive. But it's beautiful that there is a climate of the dawn of the new man and that it's okay to say that you're not okay.
Yeah, totally.
And, but yeah, I just don't think it was a thing 10 years ago, even for myself. Like, I think it's just things are open.
Well, even with my age gap to you,
it
was different again for me growing up. It was like a lot tougher environments that you grew up in.
Yeah.
And like, my house is all brothers.
Yeah.
So we didn't have, I had my mum there, was a really kind of soft, nurturing influence. But everything else was fucking really hard. And you were hard with other people generally. And so even in my lifetime, I've had to kind of take the edge off that a bit, as we've got older. And some of those things, like having to jump into projects like the Peterson one, and that teaches you to be more open and understanding about other people's lives and to be less judgmental and kind of that's certainly helped me along the way. And having kids, obviously, that does it for everyone, at some point.
Just a final thought, man, because we've got to wrap up. I've been really thankful for your time. I've had the most incredible chat. And could you pinpoint a moment in your life where there was some kind of personal awakening, a personal renaissance, where something changed?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not one of those guys who kind of forensically looks back at my life a lot. And I do actually there is probably one moment when I actually got into medicine at Newcastle Uni, right, when I left school. Good uni. Too good in a lot of ways. But Newcastle had the best medical school in the country, and I got into it. But they did it, and I had to go down for a grading exam. And I was living at Foster at that point, a couple of hours away, drove down. I was only 17 because I was pretty young for my year. So went in, did the first, it was a full day exam. I did the first half. They had an hour and a half break in the middle of it. I said, right, sweet. I had the board in the car. I said, I'm going to go and have a surf. Didn't realise at that point that the uni was so far out the back of Newcastle that it's like 25 minutes, like 35 in traffic. So I got to the cliff, surfed, waves are pumping, started surfing, kind of realised time was getting away, paddled over to this guy, asked him for the time. The test, second half of the test was starting in 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And I kind of sat there and I thought, you know what? I don't want to do medicine anyway. It wasn't expected of me by my mum. It was like, it's just what you did. If you got the marks to do medicine, you did medicine. It's like, fucking mate, that's what you do. And I did, and I right on the spot, I went, you know what? I don't want to be a doctor anyway. I hate blood. I hate the sight of blood. I faint at it. And I probably don't want to have to deal with people day in, day out with problems. It's like I'd rather just do my own thing, and that's all I've done since then. Is just do shit I want to do. Yeah. And then that's why I worked in music for a while, and it's avoiding real like adult jobs. That's been the one theme in my life is avoiding stuff that seems like adult jobs. And I worked in surf mags, which is probably the least serious fucking career you could ever go in. But but in the long run, they've turned into serious jobs. Yeah. But that was a real crossroads moment there, and that you could have gone down a straight path. But I wanted to go. Like I grew up in a pretty anarchistic. Like Dead Kennedys, my favourite band. Like we were little punks, and I didn't want to go into a system. I'd rather just do something that was a little more anti-establishment, and maybe that's why I've ended up sitting here as ScoMo's best mate now. So it's like maybe it's come to revisit me, later in life. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good question, Bill.
Yeah, for sure, man. Is there anything because I think just with that, I think you really confronted something awesome of there's a certain narrative, get the marks, become a doctor, become a lawyer. It's kind of void of, what's your purpose and what's your thing, and, tuning in to what you really want, your own intuition.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think the generations since, it's a little freer. I think people understand that. And I think kids going through school get a much better taste of other parts of life. Like my daughter's this year is doing a month in the Northern Territory in an Aboriginal community. And that would have been unthinkable when I was a kid. Yeah. That would have been unthinkable that the school would actually do that for you. So she's going to go out there and live and work in a community for a few weeks. Oh man. And so it's a lot more open-minded, and I think they let people find their own groove a little easier these days, and it's I think it's a result of what you were saying. It's the world's a bit more open. You see more of it. Social media, that you see everything, so that world's out there. Yeah, and it is one of the redeeming features of social media.
And it seems like you love your kids.
Yeah, they're good. Drive me fucking nuts occasionally, but don't all kids.
Sean, it's been a pleasure, man. Honestly, thanks so much for having me.
No, I'm going to put a little closing note in here too, mate.
Yeah, come on.
I want to thank you for tagging along on this fucking road trip. It's still going a year later. I don't know when it's going to end, but you brought a really good energy, and I think you more than anyone, mate, have summed up kind of what these protests or gatherings, or they're more celebrations than protests. Celebrations of what we've got, as opposed to wanting to kick down the doors of the houses. It's the energy you kind of get across is what I really want these things to be, and celebrations of the life we get to live. Yeah. And hats off to you, dude.
Yeah, thanks, Shauno. I don't have to go down a whole other rabbit hole again. I talk too much, but just I think what happened on that whole trip was this thing of look, we're here, we're present. It's not about being more polarized. It's not about demonizing more. It's that energy was so important. Yeah. And I really think you brought it out of me. So the froth train, mate. Thanks so much, Shauno.
No worries, mate. Look forward. Fight for the Bight 2 coming next year.
2.0.
We're back on the road, Bill. Good on you, mate.